Thanks. Well, first of all, I'd just like to acknowledge country. So I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands in which we meet today and pay respect to their elders past, present and emerging. I'm from Wiradjuri country in New South Wales, in Bathurst, and that's where I'm coming from today. For those of you who don't know me, I'm the outgoing vice president of HERDSA. I've been on the HERDSA exec for about 16 years, a long time. But anyway, my passion is really around new scholars. So those people who are new to the scholarship of teaching and learning, new to publishing in their own discipline and SOTL. And also too, I do a lot of mentoring of early career researchers. And one of the things I find is that their universities are asking our new scholars to publish in Q1 journals, present at conferences, but no one really supports them in terms of professional learning of how to do that. So I often run this workshop with a variety of people, both experienced and new scholars as well. But what I want to stress here today is this is writing an abstract specifically for the HERDSA conference. And there's really a bit of a recipe. There's a recipe for, well, I think there's a recipe for every conference, but also too for every journal. And they're those unwritten rules and laws that we don't often hear about. So the second part of the session today is going to be a presentation by Tanya, who's going to talk about the criterion that the reviewers actually use to review the HERDSA abstracts. So today this is really a focus on HERDSA and the submission of an abstract for HERDSA. So don't take this as I'm going to use this recipe for everything that I do, because it won't work. So as I said, I use this presentation and I've adapted a little bit, but for each year, we decided a couple of years ago that the conference themes would stay the same each year. So there you can see on my slide, HERDSA 2023 will be organised around these broad conference themes. Well, it's also going to be the same for 2024. So you can see there that we've got those 6 broad themes. And one of the first things when we're writing an abstract for the HERDSA conference is to actually look at those themes and to consider what our abstract might best be described as, what category would it best fit in. So what I want you to think about, and you can do this in the chat box if you like, just take one of those things and think about if you were going to go to a workshop or a showcase in the stream of one of those themes, what would be the sorts of things that you would think that you would be hearing about? For example, if I went to something in pathways and partnerships, I would be thinking that I would be looking at workplace learning or work integrated learning. I might be looking at student-teacher partnerships as such. I might be looking at industry partnerships. Pathways, I might be looking at different ways that students get into universities or accepted into universities, or different ways that they navigate through the course. So they're sort of the things that I would be looking for if I was going to go to that particular strand or that particular theme within the conference. And what I would think about is, well, does my work, my abstract that I'm submitting, does it fit into that particular theme? And that's one of the first things that we need to do when we're writing an abstract, is to ensure that we correctly identify the theme into which we're going to submit our abstract. Okay, so what I want you to do is just take probably 2 or 3 minutes, and I want you to choose one of those themes for the conference. Don't use pathways and partnerships, because I've just done that for you. And just think about what were the sorts of things that you would think you would see if you went to a workshop that was in that theme. Okay, so just in the chat box, have a go. Thanks, Susan. Thanks, Laura. Right, we're on a roll now. They're coming through. Fabulous, yeah, great. So I'm just looking at these as they come through, and it's really interesting. And we'll save the chat if we can and send it out to people, because there's such a diversity of expectations in regard to what people think that they might find under each of those themes. And someone made a really good point as I was just skimming the chat there, that what happens when your topic fits under more than one theme as such? Well, obviously, then you can nominate both of those themes, or you might say, you know, this might be the one that it best fits in, but it could also fit in here. So when the conference committee are actually programming, it might be able to fit in more than one stream. So I want you to think about this, because this is really important. When you turn up to a conference, you read the program and you look at the themes, and you've got in your head a bit of an expectation of what you might find in that theme. And nothing's worse than going to a workshop and going, well, that really wasn't what I wanted it to be. So the first step is, and the first hint is to ensure that your work actually fits into the theme, and to look at the conference website and to see also the sub-themes that are there, because that will give you a bit more of an in-depth look at what are the types of things that might fit under those themes as well. That's great. Thanks, folks. All right, so let's have a look. The next little step that we need to think about is, oh, hello, what's happened here? All right, so is the dissemination opportunities. So at HERDSA, we currently have 3 different ways that we can disseminate our presentations or our research. The first one is a showcase presentation. We have a roundtable discussion, and we have a poster presentation. And in HERDSA, one of the important things is that they have different requirements in terms of the abstracts, preparing your abstracts, depending on whether you are submitting a showcase, a roundtable, or a poster. So it's really important that you work out, first of all, how your work might be best disseminated. So if you think about, I've got a piece of work and it's just about finished, and I've got some results, and I really want to get it out there and get some feedback on it, but I really would just like to show what's going on, and I might make some connections there, or I want to get my work out in this space and get some really good feedback. I might go to a round table. So one of the things I might have is, I might say, okay, I'm going to choose a round table. I wanted to start a discussion about something that might be quite controversial in my own work. Or I might be someone who's just beginning as a new scholar, and I don't have the confidence to do a showcase presentation, but I feel okay preparing a poster as such, and then I can stand with, you know, half a dozen people and just talk about my findings. So one of the things we've got to think about is what presentation format is best going to suit you and the type of scholarship that you're currently undertaking, and also to your own level of confidence and what you're aiming to get out of the conference as well. And that's important. All right, so given that we've decided here, I'm going to focus on a showcase presentation and the requirements of a showcase presentation, and then I'll give you some examples. All right, so in the requirements for the conference, what we actually have is, these are things for a poster or a showcase. We have a presentation title in sentence case in bold, background or context, the initiative or practice, methods of evaluative data collection and analysis, evidence of outcomes and effectiveness, and references. So first hint is, use those as headings, put them into your abstract and follow them precisely. It's important that the reviewers can actually identify what part of your abstract is addressing each of those headings. Also to make sure that you follow the presentation guidelines. So if they're asking for bold or they're asking for title case, then do that, because it also makes the abstract program editor's job a lot easier in the end as well. So we're going to go through each part of these today and actually have a look at what we would do to address each of these parts of the abstract submission. Folks, please jump in anytime you like. If you've got a question, please stop me along the way. Excuse me. So please stop me along the way anytime you like, or if you've got an extra comment, please jump in there as well. Someone's just put in the chat box that there's a template that has these headings. Yes, there is, but people often don't use that. So what they do is they delete the headings once they've done the template, once they've written their abstract. So one of the things we want to do is ensure that those headings are kept in place. Okay, so let's go a little bit further here. So one of the first things I talk about in terms of the recipe is the title. And the title is really important because we're all busy people. You know, what we're doing is we're going to a conference and we're selecting a presentation or a workshop, a seminar, a poster that we want to go and see. And we know that often that we look in our conference book or on our app, and the first thing that we see is the title. And the title's the thing that either grabs us and says, yes, this is what I want to see, this is the area of my work, or this is a space in which I'd like to move into in the next couple of years, and I want to go and look at this. And I know many of us have been disappointed at some stage where you've gone to a workshop and you've looked at the title and you've thought, yep, great, this is exactly what I want to go and see. And then you get there and you think, that has got absolutely nothing to do with what I thought it was going to be. So the title is about what I call accessibility. It tells others firstly, how to find your work and how to assess whether they'd like to attend your session. So just be careful in terms of the way that you design your title and using key language or terms, and to think really, really carefully about what is your work really about. If you were sitting in the coffee shop with a colleague and having a cup of tea and a biscuit and they said, what is your work about? You wouldn't go into some fancy name for it in a title. You'd basically just give them a direct answer in terms of the specifics of your work. So that's important, all right? One of the things we went through for a couple of probably 10 years was all these trendy phrases for titles, or what they called hooks. You know, how can I get people in and listening to my presentation, or how can I get them to read my article, is by putting in some sort of fancy name. But what it does is actually detracts from the true focus of your paper. And sometimes we're distracted so much by the fancy part that we don't actually understand the focus of what's happening in the abstract. So I guess my message here is keep your title simple and say exactly what your work is about. The fourth point there, I've just put yes to kiss, 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 and then colon and whatever. And really what that means is, no, I'm not kissing all of you. I can see some people having a bit of a chuckle there. It's not about that, but it's about a two-part title. And I'll give you some examples in a moment. So it's about, this is my work. And then it might be something like, you know, the Scholarship of Teaching and Learning, New Scholars Community of Practice, a case study, or something like that. So the second part tells us it might be about methodologically, it might be a theoretical framework, it might be about a specific part that you want people to know links to the first part of that work. The other thing to be mindful of is limited jargon, because if you're not specifically in that area, or you may be in that area and misunderstand some of the terms. So we want to make sure that we limit the amount of jargon in our titles as well, because when people are moving between discipline areas and moving between discipline and scholarship of teaching and learning, some of this language might be quite new to them, and it can actually confuse people in terms of what your paper might be about. Okay, so let's have a little bit of an activity. I've talked enough here. So let's have a look at this. So I've taken these out of past abstract programs from the HERDSA conference. And what I want you to have a look at is to have a look at each of these abstract titles and to think about what might be in that particular session based on the title. So, okay, we've got a scholarship of teaching and learning one. We've got tutors. We've got, 2, 4, 6 different ones there. All right, so let's have a think for a moment. When you're ready, if someone wants to just jump in, actually, if we do, let me see. Quan, can you manage this for me, please? Can you just look for little hands up for people when they're ready, if they would like to volunteer? So if you were going to go and look at a paper, or if you were reading this in the conference abstract handbook, then what might you be expecting to find from the Scholarship of Teaching and Learning a Conceptual Framework? Anybody, jump in, be brave.
I can tell you what my decision's likely to be, is that it's like, I'm probably going to go somewhere else with that one.
Yep, okay, we know that. But what would you be expecting to see from that? What
I would be expecting, I don't know what I'd be expecting to see.
Okay.
I mean, obviously the conceptual framework is the thing, but I don't know what would sit underneath that. So the abstract is going to have to do all the heavy lifting at that point. If it's not clear, I'm not going.
Beautiful. Okay, and that's exactly the same with reviewers. If it's not clear, that's the first thing that's looked at, all right? We want to know what specifically is there. All right, anybody else have a comment about the first one?
And what do you mean I wouldn't go, Deb?
What's that?
When I said I wouldn't go to it, you said, of course you wouldn't go to that one.
I'd like to say that I would actually go to that one, because I'm really curious about what the conceptual framework is.
Ah, okay. Thanks, Stella.
Unless there was something else that was really relevant to what I'm interested in.
All right. So where might be the next part that you get the information about the conceptual framework? As Edward said, the heavy lifting there has to be done by the abstract. All right. They've really got to then play that out and specifically tell us about this conceptual framework in the abstract. Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Stella. Susan, you've got your hand up. Hey.
I was just going to say, I didn't think it was a bad title. I would go to this. I would be interested. But I think the challenge is that you're limited in the amount of words that you can use in a title, and so it's difficult to tell the story in 10 words or whatever it is.
Absolutely. So what's the take-home message from that? Anyone?
Don't judge a book by its cover.
Maybe.
I think that the abstract, like possibly the first sentence or something of the abstract's really important here. That the description of under the title.
Yeah, absolutely. But also too, just in terms of your title, Susan said we've only got a limited number of words. So what we've got to think about is, how do I use those 10 words to the best advantage possible? So people often think, oh, I'll just write the title. That's the last thing I'm going to do. But what you've actually got to do is nail your title. It's got to be the thing that people go, yep, that's it. I'm going to go and see that this abstract's going to be accepted because it says exactly what I want it to say. Seems like an intriguing title. Thanks, Juan. Sort of could be the second part. Yep. Okay, good. So I'm just trying to monitor the chat box as I do as well. All right. So quickly, let's just have a look at another one. Let's do this one. Here's an example. Talking the talk, a new model to support live and online oral presentations for assessment. What am I going to see? What does it tell me?
You see the first three words and nothing else. And it tells you nothing.
Yep, just about. If you've written this, I'm really sorry. Okay, so that's one of those. If I go back a slide, it's one of those ones that's got, that catchy title as thing, talking the talk. Well, what does it mean? Does it mean that I'm putting policy into practice? Does it mean that I'm implementing what I said, what I was going to implement? What does it tell me? To me, that's a waste of 3 words. Susan told us that those 10 words are really crucial. We only have 10 words or how many words to be able to communicate the essence of our project or the essence of our presentation. So this title is crucial. So what we want to do is we want to use those words really carefully. Let's go to the last one, learning, doing, and becoming. Developing career identity through a postgraduate will subject. All right, so what do we know about this? Don't be scared. I don't bite. I promise.
Oh, I've got my hand up. I was going to say.
You've got your hand up. Sorry, I've missed the hand. Shannon. Thanks, Shannon.
I can speak. I put it up before because I was going, we actually need to use our knowledge of the purpose of a colon grammatically in a sentence structure. So after the colon is the example, the quote, the extra bit. And the bit before the colon needs to be the whole point, the clause that actually states what it's about. So all of those you could delete the bit before.
Yep.
Because they've got the important bit as the example, quote, extra bit. Yep, that was my thought. So it works here too. Learning, doing, becoming means nothing. You could delete that. Developing a career identity through postgraduate will subject. I know a lot.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. So think really carefully. So the message here is about the title. Use those keywords or use your bank of words as critically as you can. Tell us exactly what you want to tell us in those limited amount of words without the fancy stuff. Okay, yes, we can have the colon, but remember, if it's not telling us anything before the colon or after the colon, then don't have it. It's not needed. Edward.
Would you talk us through the third one, Deb?
The third one.
Yeah.
Oh, is this yours, is it?
No, it's not mine.
I apologize. I just took these out of the handbook from last year. Open note assessments, enabling a meaningful learning and promoting student engagement. Would I go to that? Probably not. What does it tell me? Anybody, have a go. What does it tell me? What's the key focus if I had to think about what the key focus was?
It's obviously whatever that assessment is, I think.
Yeah.
But
I don't know. So when I talked about jargon, this is a beautiful example of jargon. So an open note assessment, I'm like, that's good. But if I don't know what an open note assessment is, there's one or two things going to happen. I'm either going to be really curious and go, I might go and find out what that's about, or I might go, I don't know what that is, so I'm going to go to something else. And then if we think about after the colon, enabling meaningful learning and promoting student engagement. Well, isn't that what all assessments are supposed to be? Sarah.
Yeah, I was, sorry, make sure my microphone's down. Sorry about that. I was going to say the same thing. Like if I read open note assessment, I go, I don't really know what that is. I'll go to the rest of the sentence or the title to see what other information I can get. And I look and go, that's what we're all doing or trying to achieve. So now I don't know any more information.
Yeah, absolutely. So can you see the importance of your title? That's what I'm trying to get to. All right. It's really important that you nail your title, and your reviewers are looking for that as well. Rachel, hands up. Yep.
You can say open notes a program.
Oh, thank you.
Program that the like health professionals use where different people can interact on it. So if you knew what the program was, you'd understand it. But for most people, if you don't know what the program is, you're never gonna, without Googling it or reading the abstract, you're not going to be drawn into it without knowing OpenNote is a program.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's great. So that's an example of that. Well, it's sort of jargon. So it's about, unless we specifically know what it is and it's within our discipline field, then we're not going to know what this is. All right. So it might be that we're going to attract people, and it might be there for a reason. We might want to attract people to our presentation who are specifically from our discipline. Who are using this because we might want to get some feedback on this particular assessment that we're doing. So there might be method in this madness as such. However, you know, there's lots of reasons that we can put into designing our justification for designing our title as such. Okay, be really honest. How many people have thought this much about a title before? Yeah, Rachel's nodding. Yes, Rachel, you have?
I have, yeah. Probably not for a conference, but for giving talks in places, I probably would have.
Yep, okay. Yes, Shannon's going, yes, she has for a conference before. Yep, good. All right, so here we've got something important to think about that I guess takeaway message one is ensure that you nail your abstract title, most important. Okay, so let's keep going. I'm going to run out of time. I talk too much. Okay, so the next part that we've got on our template, and Edward's just told me that this year they've been really, really kind, and they've given you 20 words for your abstract title. So, you know, you might be able to play out some more embellished, let's say, example within your abstract title, because you've got, you know, some extra words to play with. Thank you, Edward. That's lovely. Okay, so the next part is to think about, and this is from the HERDSA template, is to think about the background to your research or your study or your project or whatever you want to call it. So the background was really about, it can be one of several things. It can be about the optimal scenario. So what do we really want to happen? Or it could be what should be happening or what is happening. And we're going to break this down in a minute. So I've dragged out again 3 examples from last year's program, and they actually go with some of those titles that I showed you earlier. So let's quickly have a look at the first one. The Australian government is employing policy strategies to employ the teaching quality in higher education institutions. One aspect of this agenda, the Higher Education Standards Framework, calls for academics to ensure currency of their discipline and pedagogical knowledge through engagement in scholarship. Great. Okay, so that's what's happening. That's framing the what's going on at the moment. Okay, quickly have a read through number 2 and number 3 yourself. All right, so here in our background, what we've actually got is what I call the state of play. So what's happening at the moment and what is the landscape around framing your issue or your challenge in regard to your study or your research. So what you need to tell us here is to tightly and concisely tell us that that landscape. So what has actually brought about this issue or challenge on which you're going to report? All right, so it's a brief statement as such. Now, have a look at these. The first 2 have no the first 2 have no literature in them. The third one does. So HERDSA accepts both of those. So to think about that, if you're trying to demonstrate being a scholar, one of the things that we would be thinking about, and this is going to change for different conferences and different publications, when you're writing your abstract, is do they require some scholarly literature in there? But the issue with some of this scholarly literature, and if I look at number 3, there's 2 sources there. But to me, if I was a reviewer, this is telling me that 2007 and 2006 is the literature that this person is using to support their background statement. And while they might be, Harrington and Harrington are fairly, seminal researchers in the area of authentic assessment, is there something that builds on their work? So we know from the abstract that you're fully aware of the current literature in this area. I would look at that as a reviewer and go, I need to look at this abstract a bit further, because I'm not quite sure if this person is still living in 2007 and drawing on their knowledge from that particular era. So think carefully, if you're going to put literature in there, what's the literature that you're going to choose? And if it is seminal literature, then maybe even put a little clause in there that says, drawing on the seminal literature of Harrington and Harrington, blah, blah, blah. So we know as a reviewer that you actually understand that this is seminal literature. Okay, so we've got 3 different backgrounds or contexts in regard to what is happening in the particular area. So what I want you to do now is to take some time with any of the research that you're thinking of presenting at the HERDSA conference. I'm sure most of you have something in mind for the HERDSA conference. I guess that's why you're here. And I just want you to think about it can either be in the chat box if you're happy to make it public, or just on a piece of paper or a Word doc or whatever you're doing at home, is just see if you can knock out a couple of sentences that tells us about the context of your study. So what is that current state of play? What is the landscape? What is the environment that is creating those conditions for the issue or the problem or the challenge that you are addressing in your research? Okay, I'm going to give you 3 minutes. So this is like fast writing. Two brave people could put theirs in the chat box. That would be great if you're happy for us to have a look. Oh. Are you writing out there, or are you all just sitting quietly? Good on you, Shannon. Thanks. Champion. Thanks, Rachel. Off the top of your head, fantastic. Okay, fingers down, pens down, whatever. You stop clicking on those keyboards. Shannon's been very brave and popped hers in the chat box. So, Shannon, do you want to talk us through this one?
Unmute. What do you mean talk through?
Okay,
We have a HERDSA grant project that we're looking at emotional labour in online teaching.
Yep.
So that's kind of what I introduced there, that online teaching and learning has been part of our landscape for some time, but COVID came and turbocharged it, brought more people into the fold. But what we know is that teaching online is different to those in the classroom and needs emotional labour that's unique to this, requires a kind of emotional labour that's unique to this context. My next sentence might be about emotional labour, but that would be more about the abstract and the project.
Yeah, good. Good. Okay, so one of the things that you've just done there is really carefully differentiated between what the background is and what the project is. So the project then is about your initiative. It's about what you've actually done to address that issue or challenge that's arising from the background. So we've got Laura. Laura, would you like to read yours for us, please?
Can you hear me?
Yep, can now. Beautiful.
I can't get my camera to work, sorry.
That's okay.
So in Australasia, paramedicine education has evolved significantly. And historically, paramedic work integrated learning or workplace-based learning has been traditionally done with a jurisdictional ambulance service. However, increasing student numbers has changed the nature, and the changing nature of our profession has meant that work integrated learning has had to move away from jurisdictional ambulance services only. And anecdotal evidence suggests that there is diversity, but there's been no study actually done to actually quantify that diversity in paramedic education or paramedic work integrated learning.
Yeah, okay. So what we're doing is we're framing. Okay, I'm just going to take this one out. I did a cut and paste there, but I've cut over something I wanted to talk about, but never mind. Okay, so what we've actually done is we're starting to frame that particular background. And really what you're trying to do is think about your background as a camera. What you're trying to do is get a snapshot of what's happening at this particular point in time that raises a concern. All right. So what you've done there is you've started to tell us about the issue as well, which is good. So we've got the background. We're saying this is a snapshot. This is what's happening at this point in time. And then this is what's arising as a result of it. So it's a bit like a flow chart. This is what's happening in my life. These are the things that are influencing it, and this is the issue that's arising from it. And that's often how I teach my PhD students to think about that. What are all the things that are going on, and what would we like it to be? But this is the thing that's happening at the moment. Good job, everyone. All right, so in what we'll do is we'll get a chance to actually critique some of these in the follow-up workshop to this one. Okay, so let me just put the chat to bed for a minute. There we go. And I'll move you over there. It's all right. I talk to the computer all the time. All right, so let's have a look at this one. Here's a background. So thinking about, we've got the background to it. So the Australian government is employing policy strategies, blah, blah, blah. We want academics to ensure that they're current in their discipline and their pedagogical knowledge, and we want them to engage in scholarship. So that's the state of play. That's what we want them to do. Then what happens is that here's the issue or the problem. Here's, what's come out of this. What's the challenge of asking all academics to engage in currency of discipline and pedagogical knowledge through scholarship? We've got a whole bunch of scholarly activities that have come out of HERDSA. We know that they're for career progression and recognition, and they're directly linked to SOTL, Scholarship of Teaching and Learning. Okay, so that's a bit more of the background, and then we launch into the issue or the challenge. It's the so what. So what arises as a result of this particular background statement? For academics recruited from the profession, so paramedics from ambulances, we've got nurses, we've got teachers, we've got lawyers, we've got chemists, we've got dentists, we've got, exercise scientists. That's going to present a challenge for those people, because they might have come straight into academia from the professions, and it's going to present something that's quite foreign to them to be able to do research or to look at scholarship of teaching and learning around their pedagogical and content knowledge. This may create some anxiety, all right? They might be undertaking their doctoral studies, they might be undertaking discipline research, and they have a minimal understanding of the different voice and investigative approach to SOTL impacts their confidence, their identity, and their SOTL engagement. So I've got some things. Here's the current state of play. This is what's happening, and this is what's arisen as a result of it. Because what you're starting to do in terms of this flow chart is, this is the background. I've got the issue here. Here's my issue. And then the next chunk I'm going to lead to is, well, what have I done about it? All right, so let's have a look at another example. So this is the one about the tutors. The tutors want to make an important contribution. They deliver tutorials, they provide feedback, they look at pastoral care. Yep, okay, we know all that. But they're often hired based on their disciplinary knowledge and qualifications rather than their teaching credentials or experience. So it creates a problem. So what is the problem? Okay, that professional development influences teaching practice, but we know that past studies focusing on academics' conception of teaching and how they influence teaching. Few studies have focused on the influence of PD targeted specifically at tutors and how it shapes their teaching philosophy. So it's about, okay, we've got tutors, we want them to be able to improve their teaching quality, or we want them to engage in professional development that lets them examine their own teaching practice and their philosophy, but that doesn't arise because they're often the way that they're employed. So that's our issue for that one. So we can start to see, for this one, it's a little bit more, what's the issue with this abstract so far? Has anyone got an issue with it?
They've wasted half their words.
Yeah, I reckon they've wasted half their words, but also too, it's a little bit disjointed between the background and the issue as such. So the background's talking about how they're employed as such, or how I read it is they're talking about how they're employed based on their disciplinary knowledge and qualifications. And then here we're talking about teaching philosophy. So if I was reading this as a reviewer, what I'd want to see is a closer link between the two. So one of the ways that I can do that is I can go through and specifically I'd say I get my new scholars to go through and highlight and say, okay, well, what are you telling me about this background? And then where is that in the next part? Where is this issue that's arising from there? So a take-home message for here is about making sure that your background and the issue or challenge that arises from it are specifically linked. What's something good about it that we've talked about previously in this workshop?
It's got recent references.
Beautiful. It's got recent. So there's 2018 and 2020, which is good. So we know, oh, look, actually, they've gone and done something. They're aware of the contemporary research in this area, which is great. Well done. All right, so the next part, yes, Susan,
So just on the
I'll go
about
back.
just on the recent research, how at what point is it, like within the last 5 years? Is that like what's the cutoff for recent?
It depends. How long's a piece of string? Yep. Okay, so okay, this is my personal opinion. All right. I would say it's about 5 years, unless there's something that is, you know, really groundbreaking, that's, you know, more dated than that, or if it's a seminal piece of literature. If someone's looking at this, and they'll know what the seminal literature is in this particular area. But you know, 5 years, and particularly in scholarship of teaching and learning, which is what most of our HERDSA research is about, things are changing so quickly. If you're pulling up references more than 5 years ago, and especially if you looking at writing an abstract around technology, you know, AI, COVID, all of those things on, it's moving so rapidly that you want to have cutting edge stuff in your abstract. Okay, there's some really good commentary going on in the chat room too. Thanks, folks. Okay, quick read of this one. So, this is the Harrington and Harrington one. So what we're saying here is we want to have authentic learning, that it links students to the real world and it's well documented. Yep, good-o, all right. And then we find out that, you know, really how does it contribute to students' employability? This study captures the voices of these people. So to me, if I look at this abstract, there's a couple of issues with this one. So see if you can find those issues, anyone? What's the issue or the problem or the challenge that they're posing?
Oh, that's the $1 million question, isn't it?
Yeah, it's not there. Kate?
Make that link to, you know, why employability is, you know, potentially important. So they're kind of suggesting that, okay, you know, authentic learning or authentic, you know, is important. And then that it needs to be linked to employability, but they haven't established a need or, you know, a justification around why employability is important, you know. So there's kind of that gap where it's like, well, why, how are these things linked?
Yeah, fabulous. So again, if you're reading that, it needs to be that step-by-step process. Think about, here's the background, this is what we want it to look like, or this is what's happening. There's an issue or a challenge that arises, because what they've gone on to do here is they've started to tell us about this study captures blah, blah, blah. It's telling us about what they actually did and the study. We don't want to go there yet. So think about your background in terms of, here's the context, the landscape, the snapshot, whatever. Here's the problem. All right, that's what your background needs to contain. Okay, so we've started to do that. We started to write a background statement. I'm just really aware of time, so I'm going to push on here. All right, so the next thing is we've talked about the state of play. We've said that there's an issue or challenge arising from that. And then the next part of our abstract is this, well, what did I do about it? Or what am I investigating as such? So again, I've used those examples, have I? No, I've used some different ones about the initiative. So what did these people do in their research to actually address the challenge or the problem? So we're down to that third part. So have a look at the differences even in the word count in this particular parts. So tell me what you've learnt from number 2.
There's no mention of how they went about finding the influence, like what measures have they taken?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've got no idea what they did. So if I wanted to reproduce this, what I know is it's a qualitative study, but that's all I know. It's about teaching philosophies. Yep, okay, good. But how did I do that? Did I interview them? Did I ask them to write a teaching philosophy? What's there? I don't have too much to go on here. And it just says it's about the findings, but it doesn't tell me what I actually did as my initiative, as my process of my study. All right, let's look at the third one. What do I know about what they did?
We're not really sure what they're assessing.
Yeah, absolutely. I've got no idea. Can someone tell me what that study's about? Can you tell me how they undertook it? All right, so we can see here then, there's two examples there that we're not really sure what's happened in the study as such. Tell me what you think about the first one then. What's wrong with the first sentence? Does it, okay, I'll do some prompting. Does it live in the initiative? Should it be in that part?
It's providing us background, which should have already been introduced.
Good, Sarah. Yeah, exactly. So it's part of the background. It's not part of what they actually did. All right. Yes, they've talked about the sample. So we know we've got 4 people. We know the faculty. We know basically what happened. We know that they did weekly things. What did they use? Blah, blah, blah. But that first sentence doesn't live there. It's not about the initiative. So be careful too about where you place your information. So go back and have a look at, is this answering what I actually did, right? That's important. Okay, I'm flying through this now because I'm aware of the time. The next part we talk about are methods of evaluative data collection and analysis. So here I've said be specific. Reproducibility, part of SOTL is for your peers to be able to build upon the project, the research, the publication that you are currently presenting, all right, in the scholarly arena. So we want to know how you actually did this. How did you get your data and how did you analyze it? So look at the first one, and I've actually highlighted this for you. So we know what's the framework that they've used. They've used autoethnography. How did they collect their data? They actually went through and looked at reflective journals, meeting recordings, module activity responses. Tick, great. We know the actual data. What did they do in those? They described their experiences of engaging with the SOTL initiative and blah, 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 blah. Look at that perfect thing. Data were analysed. Yes, we know that the word data is a plural, so we have data were, not data was. Using document analysis, you can see that they've put a reference in for document analysis. 2009, I don't know about methodological references and their currency, and triangulated with Wavenlinger's 1991 3 tenets of communities of practice. So they've used a seminal theoretical or conceptual framework there. If you look at the next one, face-to-face semi-structured interviews, bang, we know what happened. Conducted with participants before and after, we know the when. We want to know why. We wanted to capture how their teaching philosophies changed. How did we interview transcripts were recorded and transcribed using inductive open coding in vivo. All right, so we're starting to get some explicit detail, and I find it interesting that this often happens in the data collection and analysis section, and we don't find a lot of specific detail in the rest of an abstract. All right, tell me what we know. Someone go through number 3 for me and tell us sort of who, what, where, all those sorts of things. So what did they use? Okay, we're getting sleepy here, I can tell. Okay, so we used semi-structured interviews. We had 12, who were they? Alumni who undertook a course between particular years and completed the program. So there's particular inclusion criteria in their data collection as well. Talk about interview questions, explored what? The perceptions on the authenticity of the course and its application in building professional competencies. It's about what they're actually exploring. How did they analyze them? Transcribed, and they used a thematic analysis process with a reference as well, like a conceptual or theoretical framework. So one of the things I want you to think about when you write your methods section is to think about the where, when, how, why, how many. So consider that you're telling us, and you can do that in just a couple of lines. You can see there that we just about know everything about study number 3 and 1 in a couple of lines, just by using that sort of who, what, when, how, why formula as such in terms of your method. Okay, last one, here we go. The last part of your abstract is about the evidence of the outcomes and the effectiveness, implications for practice and or future research. So in other words, to me, this is a so what. This is the, so what did you learn? And then why is this important for practice, policy, future research, and for whom? Is it students? Is it higher education providers? Is it people who are making higher education policy? So one of the things you've got to think about is always write a list of, I guess, your outcomes and your implications before you start writing, and think about what are those in terms of policy and practice. And then secondly, think about your stakeholders. Which of your particular stakeholders have benefited from the effectiveness or not of this particular initiative? So we've got, if you have a look at the first one, pretty brief, tells us we know now that it's important to have sustained facilitated engagement for new scholars learning about SOTL. The environment's got to be safe, and it's informed by the concepts of a COP. And if we go through the next two, just think about if you could go and identify each part of those in terms of how is it influenced either policy, how is it influenced practice, and then who are the stakeholders that it has assisted. So they're the questions I ask myself when I'm writing that last section. I'm going to take a breath, Quan, Edward, everybody, because you've probably had more than enough of me. Okay, so any quick questions before we move on? I'm just going to stop sharing that. There's all those heads. Okay, so I've either done a really, really good job or I've bored you to tears, and you either knew all that or you've just been... Yes, Susan has a question. Thanks, Susan.
Sorry, I've always got a question.
That's all right. That's great.
This has been very helpful, so thank you. So if one is going through this and seeing that there are bits of their research that is missing, is that a sign that you're not ready to present the work? Or
No, you might present it in a different way. You might go to a round table instead.
okay.
Because what you might say is, here's the opportunity for me to get lots of feedback on my work. Or you can do it in a showcase and say, this is where I'm up to, and I'd like lots of feedback. So instead of presenting for, 20 minutes and then having the 5 minutes of questions, you might say, I'm going to tell the chair of the session, I'm going to present for 10 minutes, and then I want some discussion around this, right? So it depends what you're looking for. And that's a great question. Good on you.
Okay, and I've got another one.
Sure.
Is there a minimum sample size that you need to have to present data on? No.
No. So, are you a scientist?
No.
Okay, that's all right. Don't laugh. I see lots of people chuckling. I think as scientists are hung up with numbers and how many I have, and what's going to be the power of the data and the strength of it. No. Okay, so you might have interviewed a school principal. I'm just going from my background. You might have interviewed a school principal about a particular topic, and you've got this really rich description of what they've said, and then you've got supporting documents to go with it, all of those sorts of things, and you've got one person.
Okay.
Come and tell us about that.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, someone's asked a question about the difference between a roundtable and a showcase. All right, a showcase is essentially you do a presentation. So you've got, you might have a bank of slides, you go through your slides. At the end of your slides, you ask for questions from the room. There's usually 3 or 4 questions from the room. The roundtable, there's 3 types of roundtables, and if you go onto the conference website, you'll be able to see what they are. One I know is called Birds of a Feather, because that's the one I did last year. And the round table is really a discussion. So you might take a topic that you're investigating to the group, and you might ask them to chat about their experiences. You might have a specific question for them. You might, okay, so one round table I went to was, what's the value of the ATAR, the Australian Tertiary Admissions Rank? What's the role of the ATAR now in 2023 when we take so many students who haven't come straight from high school, who bomb out in their secondary studies, and we let them in anyway, all of these sorts of things. So that was the discussion that we got to, and it was around it was a controversial discussion, and that's what they were looking for. Birds of a Feather is one where people are looking for those who are interested in a similar sort of topic. So we did one on scholarship of teaching and learning, and got all the new scholars together, and we did a speed dating with those. So, good on you, Tracy. Thank you. Tracy's just put the information in the conference website under abstracts. Lovely. Rachel's got a question.
So I did notice that when we were going through putting bits of abstracts in the chat, that some have, so say if it would fit into teaching and learning and student experience or something along those lines, would you mention what the field is? Like in paramedicine, blah, blah, blah. Or would that put your audience off a little bit as well?
I love that question, and I'll tell you why. As a beginning academic, I was an old PE teacher. So I went to my first academic conference and I wrote about physical education in my abstract title. And when I went to my presentation, there was myself and the chairperson and the timekeeper. All right. And that's all who came for my very first presentation. And then I asked those 2 people why no one had come. And they said it was because there probably weren't a lot of people in your discipline at the conference. So one of the things that you've got to think about is, and this is what I said before, what is the transferability of your project or your research to other disciplines? All right. So yes, I might have been a physical education teacher, but what I was talking about was authentic assessment. And then, but what I learned was, if I would have talked about in my title and my abstract about authentic assessment and how it could be applied in multiple ways, I would have had 40 people in the audience as opposed to the, you know, the chair and the timekeeper and myself. So think strategically about what you put in your title, how you describe your research, and remember at HERDSA, everybody's interested in teaching and learning, but not everybody's a paramedic or a nurse or a doctor or a you know, teacher or a chemist or a whatever. So think about, what have I done in my research that I could take those key concepts and go, boop, this could happen anywhere. Okay, I'm going to stop because I'm getting a look from Edward like, no, you're not. It was a nice look, Edward. It wasn't a get off now. Okay, look, I'm happy. Folks, my email is dclarke, DCLARKE. I'm at CSU, Charles Sturt University, edu.au. If you want me, please shoot me an email. Happy to chat with you. More than happy to support you in any way that I can. That's what I love doing. And if you have any questions, the recording will be available, the chat thingy will be available, and the PowerPoint will be available. So, Edward, I'm going to hand, oh, thank you, Kwong Nui.
All good. Thank you so much, Deb. I think people will find it really useful. Thank you for agreeing to be recorded. I will tidy that out and send it to Jennifer so that it can be distributed. So I suppose this is a time for Edward.
It's a very brief time for Edward because I think Tanya's sitting here quietly waiting to speak. And I think from an audience's perspective, Deb's given us the front end about what you actually do to try and get into the system. But Tanya can talk about what happens in the system and what happens afterwards. So I think we'll just segue straight to Tanya and let her go.
Okay.
Perfect.
So, hi, Tanya. Welcome along.
Thank you. Oh, great. Okay, so I'll start. Hi, everyone. I'm just going to share my desktop.
Let me admit you as a co-host.
Is that okay? Perfect.
Yep. And you are happy to be recorded as well?
Yes, I am. So I'm just checking that you can see the big screen and not. Oh, perfect. Thanks, everyone. And look, and thanks, Edward, for having or inviting me to come and talk about the review process, because sometimes we submit things and then we think, oh, how did that outcome actually come about? And so that's what I'm going to talk to you about today. So this is my second year of working with HERDSA as the program chair, and implementing quite a rigorous process that really supports everything that Deb said. So it was really exciting to listen to the tips and feedback around quality abstracts. So I'll sort of step through and just talk about the process. So as you know, we do the call for abstracts. And I've got some embedded video things that I'll show you. It might also answer some questions about the difference between the different types. I'll quickly step through the review of abstracts and the process. So, you know, we have, and this year we've had 181 reviewers put in their names. So how we manage that, how we assign, how we go through a two-step process for reviewing, and then what happens with the final decision. So I'll just keep stepping through, and then I'll pause at certain points if people have clarification questions. So there's no sound on this one, but this is just the HERDSA site. So where you can get all the information about the abstracts. You probably went in the background of Deb's session to do that. But part that I really wanted to talk about was not just being aware of the presentation formats there, so the three, but also when you decide or you're writing your abstract, just like Deb said, what is the best format for you to present where you are in your current research? The other part is to think about where it best sits under which theme and sub-theme, because when we design a program, we look for a range and balance across these as well. So again, having a look at what is best fit for you. This year, the next year, I should say. That's the abstract closing date. But then when you go down under the showcase, because some of this information is not seen on the actual portal where you submit. So really being mindful again of the intent and purpose of each of the types of presentations, and really read that well, because sometimes we see a mismatch between the abstract intent and where it's best situated. Also looking at the criteria which Deb went through, but we also have a rubric that sits in the background that I'll show you shortly as well, and formatting guidelines. We have had in the past people submit papers, and so we've stopped that sort of thing happening by making this a completely electronic process now, rather than downloading a Word document and then being able to go beyond a whole lot of different things. So that's where the information's located. Again, there are some nuances between the poster, the showcase, and the round table. And particularly if you're doing round tables, they were so popular last year. I was so excited because they generated really rich conversation. So there's the three types: the point of debate, a work in progress, which answers the question before, and the birds of a feather. And so again, when, you know, I think there's a really nice scope of opportunity to present different types of research or practice at the HERDSA conference. And it's just about finding what is best fit, and also getting rid of the mindset that one type of presentation is better than another. Oops, there's me making my Zoom recording. So sorry, you don't need two of me. Anyway, there is no one is better than another. And I think sometimes we think, oh, we all need to get a showcase, but actually, you know, it's what is best fit for your type of research. So once you've decided that, the next thing is then, of course, to step through the abstract submission. So I'm just going to show you what that platform looks like so that you can see how you select, and then, you know, what we see in the review process. So there's a whole lot of different information, and we built on this from the feedback from last year and refined our practices as well to try and capture everything at the front end so that we don't have to keep coming back to people. So you'll see there's drop downs, and you'll have the themes and the sub themes. So doing that thinking beforehand is really good. We see that, so you don't necessarily have to explicitly use those words, I guess, within your abstract. So you can sort of save words if you want to. We're also asking for biographies of the authors there, so we can put them where needed into the program. So we do have the broad criteria that sit there, but we encourage, and that's what I do here, you to go back to the more detailed information just to make sure that you have got what is required, and you're positioning why this is not only about the research, but about how you're going to engage your audience. That's been a big focus of this process, is that we receive feedback that some presentations perhaps weren't as engaging as the abstract said they would be. So really looking at how you're going to present your information is really important. And then you'll get an opportunity to review it, but once you submit it, you can't edit it. So you have got an opportunity to save it as a draft and come back, you know, the next day or whatever. But once it's submitted, it's sort of done. So I think that really supports what Deb said. So I'll just pause there. I don't think there needs to be any clarification questions around that part. I can't actually see my chat box, so I should pull that up.
Tanya, it's Alice.
Yes. Yes. Hi, Alice.
Hey, I'm just wondering, it's always a bit confusing in terms of adding additional presenters, or at what point we acknowledge the contributors of that research. So there's two things. Yeah. So I often kind of, you know, put my name down as like maybe the presenter, but then some of my colleagues go, oh, but you know, where do you put my name down, etc.
Yeah. So I was just trying to go back, but on that previous, and I'll send these slides through, on the previous slide, authors, I guess you're going to use your professional judgment. I'll ask Edward or someone else to comment there. But, you know, like when we look at authorship of a journal, who has contributed, you know, to it, we would assign them. And in the abstract submission, it is to assign contributing authors or presenting authors there. And then it is within your presentation an abstract that you can acknowledge you know, other contributors there. So there is a space in the submission to do that and to identify which ones are presenting and which ones are not. So I think that's really important, because not every team ends up going sometimes to a conference. So thank you for that. I have noticed some comments about I've had things submitted in one format and knocked back to present in another one. I'll talk about that at the end, and please excuse my phone for ringing in the background. So what happens? How are your abstracts reviewed? So against the criteria, we have a 3-point rubric. Whether each of the criteria are reflected well or not at all. And so each criteria has a mark of 1, 2, or 3. So when we get the abstract, so just so you know, last year after the we had quite a few in the pre-conference, nearly 100 and something. Last year, we had just under 500 abstracts submitted. So we had over 320 showcase, 32 posters. So we were low on the posters and 85 round tables, but we could only allocate 161 showcases, 115 round table, and 200 on-site posters. And then there were unlimited virtual. So we get this beautiful depth and breadth of abstracts, but we sometimes are unable to accommodate them within perhaps your preferred mode. But we do give an opportunity for most people. I think there was only a couple that the quality just wasn't there. So first of all, it's about quality and it's about the best fit for the mode. And then they are all grouped. So 3 blind reviewers review each abstract submission, and they are in their EOI process, which is a whole nother thing. It's a very rigorous process of information and preference and research background and practice background, and they're selected and matched up to the themes and topics within that. So 3 blind reviews, and oh, my mouse is playing up. Hold on. Can't even see it. Here it is. Is this the right one? It might have flipped now. There we go. This is the first process. The following video is aimed at providing you with an overview of the 2023 HERDSA abstract review process. Once you have accepted to become a reviewer, you will receive an email, and within that email there will be a hyperlink to the abstract portal. Once you're in the portal, you'll see 2 tabs. The Home tab provides an overview. Click on the Abstract tab to view the abstracts that you have been allocated to review. Once you are in the Abstract tab, you can click on the arrows to select the presentation type and theme and do a search to populate the abstracts just for that selection. Once it's populated, click on the View button to view the abstract. On this tab, you'll find the specific information for each abstract, the title, theme, the abstract in a Word or PDF version for you to download and review, any additional information, and most importantly, the area where you enter your reviewer score and comments. This year, you'll note that there is a rubric to assist you making your comments, and for each criteria, you can give a score of 3, 2, and 1. Please use these descriptors to assist you in making your judgments. As you review your abstract, it's important to pay attention to the language within the descriptors. Once you've made your professional judgment for each criteria, place it in the section below using the arrows. Now that you've entered your scores, you have an opportunity to provide a comment on the overall conference applicability. You may choose to use the language within the rubric to assist you in writing a comment, but remember, if assessing a virtual showcase, please comment on how well the abstract will engage the audience. Now that your criterion scores and comment are complete, you can click on the completed box and review and be able. Oh, there you go. Yes, the music was meant to make it an exciting process, you know, and so everyone, let's become reviewers. So what we did is we streamlined, like we would a lot of marking, and we found that using the rubric helped the reviewers, and the feedback was it helped them anchor their thinking around, you know, where the quality of the writing sat. So one is about the structure and, of course, the information that's brought forward, but you would have noted the applicability. So we're looking for these reviewers' opinions and professional judgments based on their areas of expertise that they bring, to also talk about audience appeal and those sorts of things as well. So what happens next? They're all submitted into the portal, and then we have these wonderful reviewers called lead reviewers. And so what they do is they then review a collection together, and they collate, and we'll get to listen to that bopping music again, and I'll show you the spreadsheet that comes up and the process, and we're really looking for them to collate the views across the 3 blind reviews into one, so that then we can do an overall review of the 2023 HERDSA Abstract Lead Review process. Before you engage in the lead review process, you may wish to become familiar with the abstract review process. A short video was made and the link is available on your screen. It is important to note and highlight that a rubric was incorporated into the abstract review process. And for each criteria, reviewers used the descriptors under 3, 2 and 1 to make their decisions. In your recent communication, you received your individual lead reviewer spreadsheet. As you can see, I have highlighted one abstract to model the lead review process through. As you review each abstract, you will note that the 3 reviewers' scores and comments have been given a separate colour of green, blue and yellow, followed by 2 white columns where you will put your overall outcome using a drop-down menu and any additional reviewer comments you have. Now let's review each of the scores against each of the criteria. Criteria 1, relevance to theme and sub-theme. Marker 1 gave a score of 2. Marker 2 gave a score of 2. And Marker 3 gave a score of 3. I can therefore confidently say on balance that this criteria was met. You might like to keep a copy of the rubric beside you, which shows you that a score of 1 does not meet the criteria requirements. Now repeat the process for criteria 2. This criteria had a score of 1, a score of 2 and a score of 3. So I make the comment that this criteria has a split decision, but that on balance it meets the criteria. Watch out for my spelling and typing skills. Once each criteria has been reviewed, please go back and have a look at the reviewer comments. Some of you might like to do this at the beginning of the process, but either way, when we look at the reviewer comments, we're looking for recommendations about the inclusion of this abstract in the conference. Once you have considered the reviewer comments, you might like to add some of your thinking into your lead reviewer comment box. I've chosen here to provide some additional information just to help explain my overall decision. Once that's completed, I'm then ready to go to my lead reviewer overall outcome, select the drop-down menu and identify whether this is accepted, accepted with minor changes or declined. That completes. Oops. Perfect. So that's the process, and it's quite logical in terms of the score, but of course there is the part where we're looking for, and I didn't put it in there because we do ask them for more nuanced information around the presentation and applicability for mode as well. So we'll see in a lot of reviewer comments that they think it's a really valuable and worthwhile project, but perhaps there needs to be more thinking around the methodology or the practical applications, and it may be best suited to a roundtable, blah, blah, blah. Or at this time, you know, there's a lot of, they've noticed a lot of multiple presentations around the same theme, and so this one might be better as a poster, and other presentations have been preferenced. So we do look at everything individually. We do look at it through a blind review process, but then this final decision part is the trickiest. So it comes back to me, first of all, to just sort all the data and to then provide a bit of a color code. So a holistic review against themes, against types of presentations, scores, and recommendations. And within that process, I utilise the lead reviewer's comments and the rubric, and I write the individual targeted specific feedback for each of the abstracts. Now, in that, where there's been a recommendation to change to another mode, that's where that part comes in as well. So again, it's a bit of a numbers and a quality and a balance game. There's those three pieces and perspectives that are moving around. I don't make the final decisions by myself. What happens is the ones that are then said to be accepted, either with revisions or without revisions, come forward. If we have an over acceptance, so remember I said we received 320 showcases and we could only allocate 161, we had a lot of those were sort of positioned as more roundtable, but we did have an over allocation. So we bring that back to the committee group where we look at this, you know, the balance across themes, and we then get to group them. So what happens is sometimes you might see 4 or 5 on the same topic, and it is then the abstract that has the highest quality that gets preferenced for inclusion in that particular mode at that time. So if you submit an abstract and you're not sure on why it was either not accepted as the mode and move to another one, please feel free to email back and ask for further feedback. We did have about 5 people last year ask for more nuanced feedback to assist them, and we are always happy. It's just that when you're doing feedback for 400 something people and, you know, whatever, we tend to go broad and then around the mode first. But we do try to give helpful hints where revisions are required around more detail around methodology or more detail around blah, 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 or, you know, your question that you're going to use for roundtables. And we believe that the feedback we gave last year in this process was really helpful in making our, specifically our roundtables, a real highlight of the 2023 conference program, because there was that really deep thinking about purpose, intent, questioning and engagement. And it was really a delight actually to see those. So that's the process, that's the thinking. And, you know, it's not easy. And perhaps we did need to publish that we had, you know, huge volumes of abstracts, because I think it's really exciting that people are putting forward this wonderful research and practice to come together to talk about it. And it is, and you should really celebrate when you do get accepted into the conference. Questions? I'll turn off my screen. Not my screen. I won't turn it off, but I'll stop sharing. Okay. I hope that answers some of those questions that came through in the chat. I'm just having a look. So I think I've answered most of the questions there. Was there, and we will be redoing those videos, so feedback on the music's most welcome.
I love it. Tanya, quick question, Deb here. I've got some students who want to put in multiple abstracts, and the advice I gave them was to put in a showcase and a round table and a poster with different presentations. So they're sort of spreading their, see if they can get into something at least. So would that increase their likelihood of being able to be accepted?
Look, I think it's really interesting. Of course, each of those would be blind reviewed. So,
Yes.
We don't know. And it is only at that final part when it comes back to me that we get to see where that sort of duplication might happen. I think it would be what we do is where we have a well-written abstract in a particular mode, but it might not get into that mood. We do like to give an opportunity for another mode.
Yep.
So I think it is, first of all, thinking about what you want to showcase and why, and how would be the first one, and sort of pick that as a preference. Because typically, if they're well written, we give another opportunity to come into a different mode at that time. So that's
that's great. Thank you.
Because we want everyone to be successful. I too am a teacher, and we want, what are your strengths? Where can we grow?
Yeah. And I think it's good that you actually you were saying that last year that you had a couple of people come back and ask for additional feedback, and I think that's really important for new scholars as well.
Yes,
because you can only give so much feedback when you've got 400 and something people, but some people do need it to be able to progress their writing and their careers. So
and I have had and we have had conversations as well. So different modes for different people. We want to grow scholarship in this space. So we saw a huge increase in quality in the resubmit. So I should say, when you're asked to resubmit with reviews, they are reviewed again. So they're not just automatically accepted. And we have a team of 5 people that do that. And so last year, I didn't think about that so much because I thought the first review was done. And we did think about, let's give most people some feedback, but I didn't think about the workload flow-on effect from that. But nevertheless, the second revisions and submissions were really outstanding with that targeted feedback. Just checking the chat. Perfect. Wonderful. And now it's a bit more transparent, which is exciting. And, please feel free to join the reviewing group. It's super exciting, and it does give you insight as well into abstracts and how they can be written and presented. And, maybe there's a space for having an early career person walk alongside a more experienced one as well in that process. So maybe that's something to think about. Thank you.